All right. So today I'm going to be sharing Baymard's research on improving the shopping experience for mobile users. And specifically, I'm really going to be talking about that relationship between user experience and customer behavior and loyalty, and hopefully highlight some important places, specifically of the mobile user experience, that can be really good opportunities to help retain your customers. Before I jump into specifics, first I'd love to introduce myself and give you a quick intro into Baymard's research methodology and the structure of our research foundation. So my name is Catherine Tots. I'm a UX researcher at Baymard, and I've been in the UX space for over 10 years. A master's degree in human-computer interaction from the University of Michigan, and I'm really excited to be sharing today with you all. So to give you a little bit of information about Baymard, we are an independent research institute focused specifically on e-commerce usability. So in addition to our large-scale independent research, we also do client work for companies like the ones that you can see here. We use a mix of different usability methodologies that are designed to uncover real user behavior when exposed to different kinds of online design patterns. So we use think aloud usability testing, eye tracking, as well as quantitative studies. Now, in total, we've observed users encounter over 11,000 specific and preventable usability issues. Now, we've taken these research findings, we analyze them, and then we group them by topic. And in total, the research spans over 75 different e-commerce topics, which you can see here in those white bars. And then within each one of those topics, we have between 5 and really specific and concrete user experience guidelines that show the exact design patterns that we've observed to consistently cause issues for users, and then design patterns that consistently solve those issues. So that's over 700 guidelines, and if we printed all of those in a book, it would be over 3,300 pages. So for specific e-commerce elements, things like the credit card form or the image gallery on the product page, basically what we give you is a collection of 5 to 15 extremely specific user behavior research insights. So that's a really good way to bring large-scale UX research into your design and decision process. But at Baymard, we don't actually stop there. We take it a step further by manually benchmarking the 60 top grossing e-commerce sites from the United States and Europe across all of our guidelines. So we've actually created the world's most comprehensive e-commerce user experience benchmark database that provides you with more than 50,000 user experience performance scores and 28,000 best and worst practice examples. So that's really powerful in understanding the current state of the e-commerce industry, the overall competitive landscape, missed and strategic opportunities, and it provides you with essentially endless performance verified best practice examples. And we think about user experience in the context of customer behavior and loyalty. This is really almost the most basic element of customer retention, because if a user is having a difficult time navigating your site, maybe things aren't where they expect them to be, they're having a hard time finding the products or the information that they're looking for, or they're having a hard time completing checkout, then that's going to lead to people abandoning the site, maybe abandoning products that they would have otherwise purchased if it was easier for them to move around the site. And today we're going to specifically look at some of those opportunities for improvement on your mobile site specifically. So when we take a look at our benchmark, you can see here on the right an example of our benchmark, and each one of those dots is one of the sites that we benchmark across all of these different elements of the mobile user experience. And you can see how many of them are down there at that poor range with those dots. The average user experience when it comes to mobile actually performs really poorly when it comes to user experience and usability best practice. And why is that? When it comes to mobile sites specifically, there's two major components for why sites tend to perform this poorly. The first is, of course, a lack of screen real estate available on mobile devices. And then the second is that mobile users tend to be more prone to distractions. We'll talk about each one of these reasons in a little bit more detail here. So small screens make the mobile platform truly difficult to design for. When you compare it to a desktop site, maybe the site on a laptop or even a tablet, there's a dramatic loss of page overview. So just how much information you can fit in a page, but users are still expecting the same level of detail, the same amount of functionality. So you basically have to condense everything from your desktop site into that small restricted screen size on mobile. And in testing, we frequently see that mobile users tend to get lost on a page as they're scrolling up and down, and they need to reorient themselves continually before they continue on with whatever task they were in the middle of. Whether that's finding the right product or completing the checkout process. So to address this, we always suggest making sure that that shopping experience is really optimized for all of these different screen sizes and devices. And again, we'll talk about that in a little more detail later on in the presentation today. And also taking that mobile first approach. So not just trying to condense your desktop site into the mobile screen, but really thinking about the mobile experience specifically and what you can do to make it as user-friendly as physically possible. Now, when it comes to distractions, users can get distracted from any number of things, and it's often a lot more likely on mobile compared to desktop because people might be out and about, maybe they're in their kitchen with their kids, maybe they're multitasking, and so there tend to be a lot more distractions for mobile users than compared to desktop. Now, when a user gets distracted, the best case scenario is that they come back to complete their purchase, but it's just as likely that they're going to, forget what they were in the middle of. Maybe they close their browser tab and go to a different site later on, or maybe they just talk themselves out of it. There's really any number of things that can result in cart abandonment once people get distracted. And the key takeaway here is that even 10 seconds can make the difference between someone checking out and someone abandoning their purchase, whether they actually intended to abandon or not. So it's really important to do everything we can to make that user journey through your site as smooth and barrier-free as possible. Doing things like giving all the information that people need up front so that there's really no opportunities for them to have to pause and rethink what they're doing and reevaluate. And also just removing any roadblocks or places where people might have to slow down, again, just to make it as seamless as you can. Now, I'd like to speak about some of the common pitfalls that sites often fall into, as well as how to avoid them on your mobile site. We'll break these suggestions up across 3 different phases of the journey on your mobile site. So we'll start with the first phase of product discovery. And this really has to do with when customers arrive on your site and they're trying to understand what the site even offers, what different kinds of products you might have on your site. And some customers may at this point be trying to locate maybe a particular product or a particular kind of product that they have in mind. So the 3 different elements that are really important to consider for this phase of the customer experience have to do with providing a site overview, hit areas. So that's, the physical way that customers are going to be navigating and interacting with your site on mobile, as well as the ability to locate linked products that may have piqued their interest as they're navigating. And again, we'll go over each one of these in a little more detail. So first, talking about the site overview that may or may not be available on your site. When customers arrive on the home page, people really are looking for that quick overview of what the site even offers and if the kind of product that they're looking for is something they might find there. So if we look at these 3 sites where the branding and the site name have been removed, it's not necessarily easy to tell which one is going to sell circular saws versus car audio systems versus a stand mixer, because none of those particular kinds of products or product category is really evident on the home page. So essentially, customers have to guess at this point which site is really going to have what they're looking for. And with a lot of our test subjects, we saw that when they have to make that inference, a lot of times they will, at this point, just abandon the site because they're not willing to put in the time and effort to explore and verify whether that guess is correct. So in testing, we saw that when people are landing on a new page from the homepage, or landing on a new site from the homepage, up to 70% of users begin scrolling up and down the entire homepage, again, to just establish that overview of what the site even has to offer. And users who don't see products like the ones that they're looking for frequently leave the site to continue their search elsewhere. So given that context, we can see how the issue of the homepage having a good overview becomes really important. Now, the purpose of the site and what the site sells might become more clear when you do include that information about brands and things like that, but there are always going to be users who are unfamiliar with the brands that are featured on the homepage. Maybe they're unfamiliar with your brand. And so they're not going to have that prior information to go on when they're making that initial decision. A lot of those customers might end up going elsewhere to look for the product that they were looking for, and it might be something that you actually do sell. And the only reason they would do that is because the product or the product type that they were looking for wasn't really featured or evident on the homepage. So we have here an example of a site that does this really well. You can see how on this site, there's a lot on the homepage that's showcasing the breadth of products that are available. And it's not just text, but also some icons and thumbnails to really visually highlight all the different kinds of products and product categories that are available. But at the same time, this homepage isn't just product categories. It's displaying featured products, sale and deal scopes, and then some information about other services that the site offers, like wedding registries. So at this point, take a moment to consider if your site's homepage really features that full breadth of products and services, product categories that is available, or whether it's only surfacing just a small fraction of what your site really has to offer. Now, the next issue has to do with hit areas. And again, this is how mobile users are really interacting with your site as far as tappable or touchable elements. And we see two primary issues with regard to mobile hit areas. The first has to do with inadequate spacing. So this is where hit areas or links or images or things that are meant to be interacted with are spaced too closely together. The most common elements that we see have this issue have to do with pagination links, the main navigation, any filters you might have, tooltip links, maybe links in the footer, and then elements like radio buttons and checkboxes. And then the other issue that we primarily see with hit areas has to do with the actual size of the hit areas themselves. And of course, when the hit areas are too small, users are going to be prone to tap on the wrong element by mistake, or maybe just be unable to easily tap on the link or the target that they were intending to interact with. So we see issues related to hit area size most frequently with small text links, main navigation menu items, and again, radio buttons, checkboxes, tooltips, icons, things like that. You might have heard of hit area issues be referred to as fat finger issues, but we don't like to use that terminology at Baymard because there's nothing really wrong with your hands or your fingers. The issue here has to do with the way the interface has been designed, and that's really what can solve this problem for people. So there are a couple recommendations that we see in terms of helping solve these hit area issues and making the mobile experience a lot easier to navigate. The first has to do with, again, that spacing. So the common recommendation from device manufacturers is 2 millimeters of spacing between elements, and we verified that through our own testing exactly in line with that recommendation. And note here that that we're using a physical measurement of millimeters instead of something like pixels, because the issue that we see is related specifically to the distance between elements that's shown on the device's physical screen. And different devices are going to have different screen dimensions and screen resolutions. So the pixel equivalent of 2 millimeters can actually vary from device to device. So it's really important to consider the physical distance and not the more metaphorical distance, if you will. And then the other recommendation is to use a minimum of a 7 by 7 millimeter hit area for all elements. And again, that's a manufacturer recommendation that we also see aligns very well with testing and ease of navigation. And again, the size that's measured on the actual screen is what's most important here. We have an example here of a site that has some good hit area usage, and you can really notice how important buttons like the filter and the sort buttons on the product list, they're very large and have a lot of space around them, so it's avoiding those hit area issues. On the product page, the tooltip links, the size selection buttons are really spaced well and sufficiently large. And even the link in the checkout flow has a lot of space around it to avoid some of these hit area and tabability issues. So here, take a moment to think if there are any specific elements or areas of your site where hit areas or spacing might be an issue for users. And then the final element here in terms of the product discovery phase, where we see a lot of issues happen, not just for mobile, also for desktop, but especially on mobile because of the screen size, is the ability to find products that are linked in product photos. So here in a lot of promotional or inspirational images that might be across your site, maybe on the home page, maybe on category pages, but even on ads that are shown off of the site possibly. We often see people are really interested specifically in the item that's highlighted here. So, in this example, they see this inspirational image and they're really keen on this particular dress that's highlighted. But when they click on that link, it's not giving them that specific product or even a way to really find that specific product. It's almost leading them to a dead end where they have to do their own work and research in order to find the product that it had initially piqued their interest. Now, in testing, a lot of times users, when they are faced with this expectation mismatch where they're expecting to be able to find the product that was featured and they can't end up finding it at the resulting link, a lot of people become frustrated, and then rather than go through the effort of trying to locate on their own, at that point they would abandon their search. So what can we do about this? Obviously, in this specific example, if you have a product in a promotional image linking to a product list, it's ideal to put that specific item near the top of the resulting list so that users can really easily find it, as well as have access to any other products that are on that product list. This expectation actually does extend beyond just the use of images, though. It really applies to any call to action, especially any that are used in ads. So the language in the calls to action can really set those expectations about what is going to happen when users click on that link. And the recommendation here is to make sure that the result matches the expectation that was set by the initial link. So really being mindful of the language that you're using. So a link that is labeled learn more isn't necessarily going to be a great action, a great call to action for an ad that's going to lead you to a listing page. Shop now could also set the wrong expectation if a user is going to be sent to a page that has a lot of information or is very information heavy. So just being sure to align your call to action with the content of the page that users are being sent to. So if your call to action says sign up, then users should be sent to a page where they can actually sign up for something. If it's a subscription service, a newsletter, any of those things that might be on that resulting page. Similarly, a call to action labeled browse product should send users to a product list or something similar like that. All right, so the next phase as people are navigating around your site will be product exploration. And this begins once users find a product that they want to explore further. So this has to do a lot with the product detail page and all the information, images, product details that are available there as people are deciding whether or not this is a product they want to keep investigating or even a product that they want to end up purchasing. And we see two primary issues with this phase of the mobile user experience. The first has to do with images, the kind of visual information about a product, and the other has to do with the product description or that more textual information about the product. So to look specifically at product images, it's probably not a surprise that this is a really important element of the product exploration phase for users. A lot of users are so invested in the product images that the first thing they do when they arrive on the product detail page, before they even look at things like the product name, the price, anything about the description, the reviews, they engage immediately with the images in order to make that initial decision of, is this a product that I'm interested in exploring further and investing the time to look at these other page elements that are here. So we see several issues specifically related to images on mobile, and some of these will also apply to the desktop experience as well. The first is that users need at least 3 to 5 images to evaluate a product. And that might seem like overkill to, in some cases or for certain product types, but in our testing, we saw that even for products that aren't really that visually driven, things like, a bottle of lotion or a can of shaving cream, users often make their decision based on the images that are available. And if a product has fewer images or the images aren't as enticing, then users will often choose other products that have better and more numerous images. The second point is that shoppers often want to have a sense of scale about a product. If you think about buying a product in a store, even if you are just seeing the product's package, the box that it comes in, you can still kind of tell the approximate size and scale of what the product is going to be. And it's a lot harder to get that sense when images online are just cut out against a white background. So giving people a sense of the scale, whether that's having it on a human model, displaying it in context next to other items so that people can kind of approximately gauge the size the way they would in a store. And the nice thing for this, if you've got a very diverse and extensive product catalog, this kind of image can often be created programmatically. So, computer generated instead of having to custom shoot bespoke images for every single product. Users also want to see the fine details, the specific product attributes or qualities that make this product unique or are really like unique selling points. And when this kind of product attribute is not specifically highlighted in product images, a lot of users, again, using the images to make that initial decision about, is this something that interests me enough to look at the product description or anything else on the product page, that's when people will end up abandoning it because they're overlooking this unique product feature. So, we want to see images of, a control panel, a remote control, nutrition or ingredient labels. Think about seeing a product in a store and you're able to look at it up close and examine it. Another nice thing about this type of image is if you've shot high resolution images of the product, as a whole, you can often crop and really zoom in on these specific product attributes and close-ups that you want to highlight. And then the final kind of image or variety of image that we often see sites have trouble with is providing multiple angles of a product. So again, it's the digital equivalent of seeing an item in the store where you might be able to pick the item up. If it's a large item, you might walk around it. You really get that sense of all the different angles and all these different details that are important to understand before you feel comfortable purchasing the product. So, in this example, being able to see all the different sides, maybe the inside of the bag, what does the bottom look like? Does it have feet? How long is this strap? All those different details that are really inherent in the in-store experience. And then we're trying to find the best way to replicate that in the online world. Now, we also see some important ways to make the item description, so the text about the product, more user-friendly and easy to read on mobile. So first, we want to make sure that we're using short line width and avoiding these big paragraphs of text. So you can see in that example on the left how difficult that huge block of text is. And a lot of people, if they're presented with this on a product detail page, they will just not even engage with it. Like, they're not even going to try piecing out the important details from this, because that is just too overwhelming and too time consuming. So we want to see things like mostly bullet points, short lines, not a lot of long paragraphs or sentences. Also, adding headers to each of those sections or bullet points that we just talked about makes that skimming process a lot easier. Online users don't tend to read things in depth. They're really, breezing through the text as they're trying to pick out the important details. So when we front load the bullets or short descriptions with the most important information, using that bold text to kind of draw more attention to it, we're actually facilitating the behavior that users already have when it comes to reading text online. And so that makes this text a lot more digestible, a lot more understandable. People are going to be able to pick out the most important information a lot faster and then come to that decision if this is a product that's going to meet their specific needs. And then finally, in terms of readability, using a lot of white space between paragraphs or those bullet points that we just talked about, and making sure that everything has kind of space to breathe. If we think back to that huge paragraph of text in the first part of the slide here, it's not just that it's a big paragraph of text, but it just looks so dense. And on mobile, it can actually be very hard to read across each line when they are so close together. So making sure that there's a lot of spacing to make it easier just in general for people to read. And then the final phase here, of course, is conversion. So this happens when people have found the product that is right for them, and they would like to move forward with purchasing it. And I really love talking about conversion and checkout because it seems to me like such an important part of user experience when it comes to e-commerce, because this is the point at which users have already decided they want to give you their money, right? So we want to make that as easy as possible. We want to remove all of the roadblocks, all the preventable things that we can that are going to get in the way of that. And we see a couple specific things here when it comes to mobile in terms of improving the conversion experience. The first is making sure there's a guest checkout option, form fields, and the order review step. And again, we'll walk through each one of these specifically. Now, according to our research, the current checkout abandonment rate is currently around 70%. Why is that? When we look at the specific reasons that customers end up abandoning their purchase, we can see, some of these usual suspects at the top. Things like high shipping rates, taxes, fees, those additional costs. Those are things that you might not have much control over, and it might not be something that you can do a lot about when it comes to decreasing checkout abandonment. But if we look further down the list, there are a number of issues here that you probably can't. So things like account creation and the long checkout process are those next most common reasons for checkout abandonment. And those are things, aspects of the user experience that we can do something about. So those are the items we'll be focusing on today. So talking about the forced account creation, nearly 1 in 3 users have abandoned a purchase within the last 3 months because a site required them to create an account prior to placing their order. So suffice to say, users really don't like being forced to create an account when making a purchase online. We can see some of these quotes from our usability testing. People say, maybe I don't want to be a member. I don't want them to keep my information. It's really difficult to get out of the newsletters you sign up afterwards. I still get physical mail from this person I ordered once from, and it's impossible for it to stop. Someone says, I don't do this if I walk into a store. So that forced account creation can be a major roadblock in getting people through the checkout process and converting. So in general, the takeaway that people don't like being forced to create an account online because they are just not comfortable with sites keeping their information long term. And so we want to facilitate this guest checkout where they don't have to create an account if they're not comfortable with it, because at least you're getting them to convert this one time, and eventually down the road, if they're satisfied, they're going to come back and maybe eventually create an account because now they feel that loyalty to your site and your brand. So when it comes to having a guest checkout option, we want that to be as obvious as possible. So on desktop, we suggest placing it in the upper left corner. So that's kind of an eye tracking where people tend to focus the majority of their attention when they first arrive on a new page. And then on mobile, we want to see it at the top of the account selection page. So you can see here in the example on the left, guest checkout actually falls below the fold. You can't actually see it really without scrolling. And that's really problematic because someone who is one of these 1 in 3 people who does not want to create an account online is maybe not going to see that option. And then they're going to abandon their purchase at this point because it looks like they have to sign up when actually there is that guest checkout option. Whereas in the example on the right, you can see that checkout as a guest, having that contrasted color really draws the eye so people can use that option right away, and there isn't that risk of abandonment at this point. Now, the very best invitation at this point is actually go ahead and put people in the guest checkout flow, and then people who do not want to create an account can go ahead and seamlessly move their checkout. And if they have an account, then they will be able to sign into it at that point. We also see an issue with very long and complex checkouts. This is the third most common reason that people give for abandoning checkout. And when we look at the actual checkout form or the process that people have to go through in order to get through checkout, the average poor experience or a poorly benchmarked site is going to have more than 14 fields within their checkout. So that's 14 fields that people have to input information into, move on to the next one in order to get through all the information that's going to be required. Meanwhile, the top performing sites we see have less than half that, 7 fields that they have to get to. So with a little bit of mindfulness and making sure that we're only asking for really what is necessary, you can drastically streamline the amount of information that people have to put in. And really each one of these fields is an opportunity for errors, and every error is a risk of abandonment due to this process becoming too burdensome or lengthy. So there's a lot of different ways that we can reduce the burden here. The first and typically the easiest is just to omit any unnecessary fields. So do you need to know if it's a Mr. or Ms. or Mrs.? Things like middle name, company is often not relevant. Having to have even a phone number or knowing if it's a cell phone versus a landline. This is information that you may or may not find actually relevant to collect. And so any of these are going to be opportunities to simply just cut the field altogether. There's also opportunities to combine or reduce the other form fields. So asking for a full name rather than a first name and a last name. that automatically, that cuts the burden of putting in your name by half. Have code field auto detect. So if you put in and then having the shipping address match the billing address by default. So that's, again, streamlining this. It's often an option that people are going to select anyway. And you're just, taking out these small, maybe subtle places as people are completing checkout to reduce the interaction and the input that's necessary. There's also a certain number of specific keyboard optimizations, specifically for mobile, where actually quite a lot of our benchmark sites get at least one of these wrong. And you can see there 60% get at least two of these optimizations wrong. So this is, again, maybe a subtle thing that you might not have thought about, but it makes a major difference when it comes to the user experience and helping people get through checkout. The first is that annoying autocorrect tendency that our devices tend to have. I have an unusual last name, and I can't tell you the number of times I've had to, type and retype, undo, putting in my name into checkout because it's trying to autocorrect it into, something that's an actual word, I guess. But with fields like the name, maybe the address, these are places where people are often going to have to retype because the autocorrect is being a little bit overzealous. So whenever you can within these fields, when it doesn't make sense to have that autocorrect, going ahead and disabling that will streamline the process quite a bit. Similarly, that auto capitalization feature, this seems like a very subtle point, but during testing, we often see people, users are so risk averse, they really don't want to trigger an error message. So even if your site will accept the email, whether or not it has a capital at the beginning or not, we often see in testing users going back and retyping their email address to make sure that that first letter is a lowercase. So again, this is something that seems like a minor point, but it's putting quite a burden on users trying to make sure that they can get through checkout without having to trigger an error message. Matching the keyboard that displays to the information that's requested in the field. So there's actually a number of keyboards that might be triggered depending on the way that the field has been coded. And we want to make sure that the one that pops up isn't just the default text one if it isn't contextually the best choice. So for numeric fields like the credit card, like the security code, like the zip code, we want that numeric keyboard, the kind of numpad keyboard, to pop up because the only anticipated input for that field is going to be numbers. We actually saw in testing users who, when the default QWERTY keyboard popped up for a numeric field, people kind of froze and got a little panicky. They're like, what is it? Is there a secret, alphabetic code that I don't know about that I'm supposed to be putting in this field? So that can go a long way to, at the very least, helping people efficiently get through the field so they don't have to switch to the numbers, but also just reducing any opportunity that there is for that pause, that opportunity to rethink, what do I need to do? You're trying to help people minimize their thinking and the amount of thought and effort they need to put into going through checkout. And then the last one has to do with just making sure that the attribute combinations for all of these is correct. We have a really great cheat sheet on our website that you can download and compare to the code of all your form fields to make sure that all the different combinations there are in line with our usability suggestions. Now, the final point here has to do with the last step right before the conversion is complete, and that has to do with the design of the order review page. We actually found during testing that 11% of desktop shoppers misinterpret the order review step as the confirmation step. So this is actually, the order hasn't been placed yet. This is supposed to be the opportunity for them to review all the information that they've put in before they hit confirm. But it contains basically the same information that you have on the review or on the confirmation page after the information has been submitted. So because of that, people tend to misinterpret it. They think the order has been submitted, but it actually hasn't. And 11% is quite sizable. Now on mobile, this number is likely even higher because of that small mobile screen real estate. You can fit less information within that space. There's less for them to go on. And so it's a lot more likely that any cues that they would have that this is the review step and not the confirmation step are going to fall below the page fold or kind of not be evident right at the top of the page. So this can be a really important point, like a surprisingly important usability design impact. Of course, if people think they've submitted an order and they never actually submitted the order, they're going to be like, where's my stuff? And so it might end up costing you money to talk to them on, through customer support and, figure out what the problem was that they didn't actually submit their product. And that, of course, is going to decrease that brand loyalty, the likelihood that they're going to come back and purchase again, when really this was a preventable design decision. So the most important thing that you can do is make sure that it's really prominent that this is the review step and not the confirmation step. And the best way to do that is to make sure that that place order button is super prominent. You can either place it at the top of the review step, like they're on Sephora, or you can use the sticky button. So view step, they have that prominent button at the bottom of the page that's always there. So it's just a really visual signifier that this is a call to action. You have to do something before the order is placed, and then that will decrease the likelihood that they will accidentally abandon a cart at this point. We actually had one client that just from implementing this place order button on the review step, they saw a $10 million annual increase in revenue because people were previously accidentally abandoning their carts. So we've got a quick sheet of key takeaways. These are just high-level usability recommendations that we've discussed during the presentation today. Now we actually have, more than 700, I think nearly 800 guidelines at this point, and 39 in checkout alone. So on our site, Baymard.com, you can get access to all of those, as well as our audit services, where we'll walk through all the different usability issues that your site has. But this is just a quick overview that you can use to, maybe think about your site, and if there's any specific mobile improvements that you can make to make that process even more seamless. And that does it for the presentation today. Thank you very much.
Some questions.
Hey, Catherine, that was awesome.
Yeah.
So I think there's a couple of questions down here in the Q&A fields. If you want to take some of these, some really good questions. I think the first one's from Matt. Can you see those over there, Catherine?
Yes, let me see. All right, so from Matt, have you seen any difference in conversion rates with 3 to 5 images versus lifestyle videos on the product page? So in our usability research, we actually see that videos have quite a low usage rate. So people are typically not very inclined to activate a video, or 360 views often have the same issue where there's just a low rate of usage. There's a higher rate with if you have a GIF or something that doesn't need to be explicitly activated. We always recommend that any videos should not be a replacement for angle images, and that goes for 360 views as well, because the usage rate with images, angle images, close-up images is just so much higher typically than videos or the alternatives. So I hope that answers your question, Matt. All right. So the next question is there a place where we can find all this research? Do you do site analysis? Yes. So on our website, Baymard.com, we have a product called Baymard Premium, where you get access to all of our research. So all 700, 800 guidelines that we have, going really in depth as far as what we observed during testing, all of the nuances as far as implementation, different design solutions, as well as access to the full benchmark and all of the best and worst practice examples that we have. And then we also offer audit services. So rather than having to go through all 800 of those guidelines yourself, one of our expert auditors can walk through it. We give you a deck that has detailed analysis of all the guidelines that either weren't adhered to or were adhered to, and then those specific actionable recommendations for what to do to improve them. And then you also get a scorecard that serves as a nice summary of that. All right, the next question from Amanda. Use these image preview areas to also include content such as descriptive infographics or videos. What are your thoughts on this? Yes, definitely. So infographics, videos, we definitely recommend including those in the image gallery at the top of the page. In our testing, we found that when these weren't included in the main image gallery and were instead included, maybe in the description or somewhere farther down the page, it was a lot more likely that people would overlook them, end up not finding them. So definitely including those in that image preview or image gallery. And with infographics and text on images specifically, because we're talking about mobile here, I want to emphasize that it's important that any images with text or things like infographics be sized for mobile. An issue that we often see is that the image is designed for desktop, and on mobile, it will get squished and condensed. So either it's going to be kind of the wrong dimensions, or most commonly it's going to shrink the text to be so small that it's not readable on mobile. So definitely including anything with being mindful of that. And that's kind of part of that whole mobile first mentality of thinking that through when you're designing infographics or images that have text. All right, the next question here from Amanda. Any specific best practice recommendations related to trust seals, site security messaging on guest checkout, login page, create account page? I'm not sure if we have any specific research on trust seals specifically. I'm trying to recall. Definitely a lot of signals of security, making sure that there's the little lock on the URL bar. Even messaging like saying secure checkout, having padlock icons around like that. Those are all kind of subliminal messages, if you will, as far as, the site checkout being secure, being safe. I will go into my Baymard Premium and see if there are specific guidelines related to trust seals, but certainly any additional messaging that you can give regarding checkout, not just guest checkout, but even for people creating an account, that can go a long way to helping set people's mind at ease, for sure. All right, Nicole asks, we use Shopify and have a theme. Are these studies done mostly one custom build websites? So for our studies, we select the test sites based on a number of criteria. We try to have a diversity of sites. So some of them may be Shopify, some of them might not be. That's not necessarily something that we consider when we're selecting the sites that we want to test. But I am aware of the different options that Shopify offers. We actually have collaborated with Shopify to provide some educational UX content for them before. So I believe that most of these recommendations, if not all of these, should be available within Shopify, depending on the theme, the add-ons and things that you might be able to tweak with the default template there. All right, and one more question. You mentioned the importance of photos and imagery for product pages. Do you have any thoughts or stats on using videos, specifically related to desktop and mobile? So again, we do see actually quite a low usage rate with videos, as I mentioned before. I'm not I don't think that there's a huge difference that we found as far as mobile versus desktop, but in general, videos in 360 have a low usage rate. And so while we don't necessarily recommend that you don't have them, because there are definite benefits and users who will derive great value from those, they shouldn't be a replacement for these angle images, these close-ups and things like that. All right, and I think that answers all the questions.
That was awesome, Catherine. We could listen to you all day. This is stuff that is very near and dear to our hearts here at Bolt. So really appreciate you taking the time to share this stuff with us.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine.
Great, thank you so much.